Thank you. Good evening, everyone, or afternoon. Thank you for being here. I will give a presentation on a Philatelic reference library that I'm creating in a program called Zotero. I only add references for Latin America and the Middle East because that is what I'm collecting. The presentation will have several parts. First, a general introduction. Then I will give an introduction to the project itself. And I will try to do two examples, where I switch to other programs. One is how to search and export references. And the second one is called Cite and Write. That is when you are writing an article or a publication, you can add references in the article itself, and the program will generate a bibliography at the end for you. So you don't have to do all the manual work yourself. It will do it automatically. And I will show it to you. And I also want to talk about the future, because although I am doing the work at the moment, at a certain point, I will die and the program will be left behind. And that's not what I want. I want some other people to take it over. And for myself, I have been collecting stamps since 1966. And I collect Latin America since 1999. It's when I bought a large box with 13 albums, and that's the start of my collection. I start the Middle East, and especially Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states since 2004. I have studied sociology and especially methodology and statistics, but I also did a minor in philosophy and sociology of science. And especially that part of my education is why I got interested in counting and measuring the output of departments of science, especially for my own science. And my professor asked me to be a member of the first visitation commission. We had to look into the productivity of departments of sociology, politics, and management studies, and also in their educational programs. It also got me on track with scientometrics, that is the measurement of science, production of science, citations, and there are a lot of programs that you can use and view. And a long time ago, I created a bibliographic database for the medical faculty of the University of Groningen. That was in 1998. It was in DBase 3, very old-fashioned, and I didn't know if they used it very long. But it gives me an idea what to do and what to look for when you're looking for a bibliographic database or a reference manager. I have been writing scientific articles since 1993 and have been using Reference Manager since 1998, RefWorks at the university since early 2000s, and Zotero since a few years. As I no longer have an appointment at the university, I had to find something else, and I got into Zotero. Now, the problem that I'm trying to solve is not a new one. It's a very old one. The first mention was by Jena in 1887, so more than 150 years ago. And he said, there's so many publications, how in earth will we find the correct one? And the same sentiment was put on paper by Birch in 2004. He also said, there are so many publications, and how will you, as a researcher or a philatelist, find the right ones? It is very hard. In science, this problem has been solved, but by commercial ventures, and they are very expensive. Now, your own Carlos Sancho had a talk about Latin American philatelic literature a few years ago, and the last sheet he showed was this one, where he said, I want to have a project where you store the references or even more, and then as a user, as a philatelist, you can ask the repository a question, and then you might get an answer. You might get the articles you are looking for. Now, there is sometimes you have to be very careful what you think and what you do. There are a lot of concepts that are confusing or might be confusing. And therefore, I have made a short list that gives you some idea how to look at certain items. You have a reference list, and it's usually for a scientific article, and it gives a support for the ideas and the claims and the concepts in a paper or a book in an article. It should also be used as a list in a philatelic article, so that when you read the article, you can go back to the original articles and see how the ideas are built up. Then you have a bibliography. Usually it is a larger reference list that contains ideas for further readings and may include some notes that you might want to know as well. And then you have an index, which is a bibliography, but sorted by tags or keywords. For instance, you can use the keyword airmail or cover or forgery, or, well, there are a lot of them. And then you could have a review, which is, I haven't seen in the philately, but it is used in science, where people read a lot of articles on one subject matter and then have a condensation of the information in the bibliography so that you can understand what you have to know. This is a hype. There are a lot of review articles at the moment, and it's easier to make than an original article. And then you have a library, and a library is a physical place where you can go and get a book or a journal. And a reference library combines the ideas of all of these. But at the moment, the difference between a real library that only has physical objects, books and articles, is, well, vanishing. More and more books and journals are digitized. So, my project is two-part. The first part is the storage part, as shown in the sheet by Sancho. You see that you store articles or books or whatever in digital form usually, and I usually use them from archive.org, where you can find a lot of philatelic books and journals, but also background information. Older governmental publications containing information on the postal service. But also, very thankfully, there are a lot of societies that put out their articles in digital form online. So Peru, Chile, Ecuador, and Uruguay all have their publications online. And I'm very grateful, otherwise this project would not have been possible. MEB, that's the Middle Eastern Philatelic Bulletin. It's a free journal you can get. It's very large, about 120 pages to 200 pages each. Unfortunately, no Latin America. Then if you put something in a database, you need an idea how to get it into the database. And James Nagus in 1991 wrote a book on how to search for your references and your publications and how to write them down. And in his book, you will find a lot of very old-fashioned bibliocards where you have the title and the author, but all on paper. And he also goes into things like bibliographies and indexes. Most of the things we have access to as philatelists are indexes. There are a lot of have been created in the last 100 years. But for science, the Institute for Scientific Information developed a format to store information. It's called RIS format, Research Information Systems. That's the name. It has developed it since 1956 until 1980, but it's very hard to find information. And it tells you how to uniformly put down information for books, articles, chapters, full journals, and electronic resources. The electronic sources since 2000. Before that, it was only books and articles. Now, why did I choose Zotero? There are a few criteria. One of the most important, it is free. So anyone can download it and use it. You also can have a free network storage, but only up to 300 megabytes. And one of the very important aspects is that you can have group libraries that are libraries that you can share with others, not on your computer themselves, but they are stored online at Zotero, and anyone and everyone can access them if you give them the right to access, which I do with my database. Also, it has good import and export facilities. You can export RIS and RefText, but you can also directly import from Amazon Books and WorldCat. Maybe you never heard of your WorldCat, but it is one of the largest worldwide libraries access fronts in the world. And it gives you access to, at the same time, the Smithsonian, American Library of Congress, and a lot of national libraries in the world. So you can search for books worldwide. And another very important aspect is it has integration with Word and other word processing programs. And it has an integration with R and Python, that are statistical programs that you can use to analyze data. And one of the other things that it has, when you write an article, you usually want to have a program that can lay out according to the rules of a scientific journal. Zotero is predominantly used in scientific research. So then you have to adhere to one of the styles that they use. And I think that the American Philatelist uses Harvard as its style of reference. So when you are writing an article, you can use Zotero to have the style that you want for that journal. And here you have a few examples how the information is stored and which information I try to store. You see, for a book, yeah, well, you have a title and authors, of course, but I also want to have the place where the publication was made, the publisher, the date of publication, the number of pages, the language, ISBN number, the International Standard Book Number. And usually I also try to find an abstract. What I don't usually do is what is marked in blue. I don't say where it is found or where the location is where it is found, because that's not very important usually. The only thing that might be important is an URL where you can find information. And that is what I'm really searching for if I try to have something to add to the reference list. And it's very important, not just for now, but especially for in the future. It will be the main focal point for most people. For a journal article, I want to have the name of the publication. This is Random Notes, that is for the Saudi Arabia Society. But you can have the main sheet or the Central American newsletter or any article, any journal in the world that you want to address. So for Peru, Chile, Ecuador, I will use the names that are given to the journals so that you can find all the articles that have been published in those journals. And you can, I also take down video recordings. I will add all the videos ever published on my Oficina. I'm in the process of making them fit to be added. And you can see the information I store for those. Then, which resources do I add to the database itself? Well, there are a lot of them. Blogs, books, articles, manuscripts, videos. I also add named auctions, and especially if I can find the auction catalog in digital form. And I have a few auction houses that have given me permission to add their information, and even add the information they might have on books they have published and use the abstracts they have made. I also want to have presentations, and I also want to add exhibitions, but that is a little bit more difficult because I don't know whether their URLs are stable, and that's a problem we have for the moment. Then there is a very strange category. It's called request for information, response with information, or for the record. Normally you have an article in a journal, but sometimes you have questions or letter to the editors, and those will come as a request for information or a response with information. I also will add all those to the database, and usually they are not found in the indexes of the journals themselves. So I will have a lot more information than the journals themselves. What I exclude from the journals of societies is society news, the meetings, the gatherings, financial disclosures, whatever, membership system, maybe information on new members, the list of members, when payments are due. And I usually do not include the new issues, but it depends. When there is much more information on the printer and the number of stamps issued, then I might add them, but not if there are just a list of new issues. Because in most journals nowadays, you will find a long listing of new issues, which doesn't give you any information, and most of them will be in catalogs anyway at some time or another. And I will not add obituaries. Now, in the project, you have another side, namely the users and their interaction to the depository. In his schematics, there is Busqueda. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it is only search. In my project, that's a basic issue. That's not something that I'm really looking for. I want to have more, that you are able to create a bibliography and save and export it, that you can download articles directly from within the project itself, and that you can have cite and write. That if you are a member of my group, not if you are just accessing it, but if you are a member of my group, that you can create articles on your own, and that you can access all the information already in the database. You don't have to do it again. Now, what's already inside my database at the moment, I use keywords so that you can search for an article. And there are different types of keywords. The biggest one is geographic. So any type of geographic concept is inside, not just countries, but sometimes also towns or areas. For instance, one geographic concept is Lima, or Kingdom of Guatemala, not just Guatemala, because it refers to another kind of old-fashioned form of addressing a country. And there are 291 different philatelic concepts involved. That means cover, forgery, cancel, essay, and a lot of others, and emission, first emission, second emission, and the names of emissions. Because I do not use catalog numbers, because then I would have an issue. Which catalog to use? Do I use Scott? Do I use Michel, Iver, or a national catalog? And for some countries, even which national catalog? Because I think there are 2 different catalogs for Bolivia and 2 different catalogs for Argentina at the moment. And there are different categories for airmail. In airmail, I also try to get information on the airmail companies. So you have Scata, Lufthansa, Air France, Imperial Airways. So different airway lines will also be addressed. So if you're searching for a specific one, you can address that as well. Now, there are several others you can see, but the most common ones are, well, the first 5 or 6. There is a very specific one called science, because I'm not only taking into the database philatelic articles, but also scientific articles. Although I do not work at the university anymore, I still have access to the university, so also access to the library and scientific articles. And sometimes I'm going searching those as well. They might not be accessible, maybe behind a paywall. Then the types at the moment. As you can see, the biggest volume of references are articles. Most of them are articles, and then books. A few web pages. Videos will increase significantly when I have added my Oficina. Then it will go from 150 to 500. And there are a few things that you might find strange. I also have dissertations in the list, which normally you would not find anywhere. Just 6 at the moment, but there might be more. I will add when I find them. Then among articles by journal, you see that the most articles are from the American Philatelist and then the London Philatelist, because I started out with general journals and not as much with specialist journals, except for the Middle East Philatelic Bulletin and the Random Notes. That were the 2 first journals I added, and later I found access to the American Philatelist and the Collectors Club Philatelist. 2 journals have been completely added already. The Essay Proof journal, I have added all the articles concerning the Middle East and Latin America, and the same goes for the Aero Philatelist Annals. I will add the sister journal for the Aero Philatelist Annals, the Airpost. Now, at the moment for Latin America, you can see that the different numbers of articles or resources already included for most of the countries in Latin America. And most articles at the moment are for Colombia. I also try to be as cautious with the names of countries that I will list them as Brazil with an S and not with a Z. And I will try to adhere to these names. So Chile with an E at the end and not an I. I will also have United Kingdom and not Great Britain, so that it will be easier to find. Otherwise, you might have to have different keywords and references, because these are keywords. There's one stranger maybe, Canal Zone, but as part of Panama and Colombia, I also add those, and it's one of the countries I collect. Now, I'm hoping this will work. I'm going to switch from the presentation to Internet Explorer. Do you see Internet Explorer? If it is correct, you see an image of my database.
Yes, we see the Zotero.
You see this, okay,
yeah.
That's fine. I was a little afraid that this might not work. As you can see, where I have the mouse, you can search. And now it says title, creator, and year. That's not what I want. I want to have full text. That gives me access to most of the fields that you have. However, it doesn't give access to searching in keywords. And that's a problem. But that's not a problem when you become a member of my group. Now, one of the things that I've tried, because I find it very It should be a familiar publication. These are the 4 books by Erie on forgeries. And these 4, all these 4, the first, the second, and the third edition, have URLs. I will click on one, and you can see at the side the information I have stored for this. And you see at URL that there is a URL. If I now double click on the URL, and it will go to the global Philatelic library. And here you have to download Album Weeds, the book. And there are a lot of classic forgery books that you can download, because most of the books before 1920 do not have a copyright any longer. So you can download it freely. And there are, I think, about 2,000 of the 6,000 references that I have at the moment do have a URL that might give you a download access. Now, I hope that someone will be here, but he isn't. I tried this one. I now get a list of all the publications in the database by Jamil Khoury. And this list is not complete. I know he has written much more. And if you have published, search for your name and see if I miss publications that you might have written, and send the information to me. So you can see, you can have a list of your own publications. Now, there is one thing you can't do, not here. At this site, you see that there are a few icons, but if I'm going over it, there's nothing I can do. But it gives you the possibility to download a bibliography. So you can have a bibliography of your own publications. Or if you search for a certain country, then you can have. Now I will have another one, and that is where I go for I don't see airmail. Oh. Airmail, and let's say Argentina. I have selected 2 of the keywords at the left side, and it gives me a list of all the publications that have Argentina somewhere, and that are concerning with airmail. There is a strange one, publication that even the people from the International Society for Guatemala Collectors had not heard about, the Revista Postal de Guatemala. It's a small journal, but it gives you the information of, for instance, airmail rates to Argentina and airmail rates to Costa Rica. That might be important if you want to research a postal tariff, a postal rate, and for instance, if there is a tax on it, whether it's correct or not. And then you might want to have this kind of information. There is a lot of this kind of information in the database, especially governmental older resources on anything to do with the postal service, volumes before 1900, tariffs before 1900, and I think there are about 100 or 150 of those in the database, and I think that 90% of those will have a URL to download. Now I go to online, and this is, this is my own Zotero online. Zotero copies all the information that I have in my personal installation and saves it online. So if my computer crashes, it is saved at Zotero. I only need to have my login information, but I can retrieve the information I have online. And you see here above is my library. It contains my publications, my scientific publications, and some less scientific publications. And you see in online that you have your own publications and group libraries. Group libraries are ones that you can share with others. So if you, for instance, use Google Docs and have the same group libraries, you can write at a publication together at the same time, insert references at the same time. And you can decide where to publish it as well. It might make it easier. The name I'm trying to type in is the name of the editor of this, a little bit slower than it was this afternoon. Here it is. These are the publications of Martin Lovegrove. He is the editor of the random notes. You can see how many there are. I can't. I see only 1, 2, and there is a number behind, and I see your faces. And now I can go to these. I can select a part of it, and I don't know what the limit is of downloading. I think possibly 100. But now I can say I want to export the data, and you can see that there are a lot of options you can export to. Most commonly is RIS and RefWorks tagged, because at universities, people might use a reference manager like Zotero, and you can exchange data with them using RefWorks tagged or RIS or EndNote. EndNote XML, and possibly Zotero RDF as well, but I do not know whether all programs will read them. But these are the most common ones you can export. Then you can say, I want to create citations, and it will give you citation. It's not very useful. And now I have a problem. No. But I can also create a bibliography, and there you have it. I can even change the layout and the style. I want Chicago, and it will adapt immediately what has been written. So you can have a bibliography in your own accord. That's what you can do when you have an online. Now I will go to my personal version. It's an image of what you saw online but I can do a little bit more. I could say I want to export the library, complete library, everything inside it, all 600, almost 7,000 references. And that's what I sometimes do, to save it and store it on another computer. And I can also say I want to select everything. I'm now pressing Control A to select everything, and I can say, okay, I want to create a bibliography for the items. I won't do it now because it will take time. You can also generate a report for items, and maybe. And then you get a list of all the publications inside the database, as if it were library cards. And you can see all the information that has been added: a title, the type, the authors, the date of publication, And here you can see a download URL, but also you can see the text. So it's Mexico, it has essays, proofs, and it has proofs and essays on the stamps for Maximilian. Now, what do you do if you have found a publication? If I have a URL, you can double click on a reference and it will take you to the URL. And depending on the settings of your browser, it could also be possible that you can directly download the references on your computer. When I double click a reference, it will download directly. You can also go to worldcult.org, where you can find the nearest library. Unfortunately for me, that is usually the National Postal Museum Library or Smithsonian, distance 4,000 kilometers. That's a little bit awkward. Another one you can use is the catalog that is at the Royal Philatelic Society Library. It is a general access to the Royal Philatelic Society Library, the American Philatelic Research Library, and the Global Philatelic Library, which is very important because it also has a department for the Crawford Library. For those that don't know about the Crawford Library, the Earl of Crawford was somebody that collected philatelic literature at the end of the 19th century, early 20th century. And his books, about 20,000, were in a publication, and a lot of them have been digitized and can be found at the Global Philatelic Library in the Crawford Library. Another source where you can go if you have found it, but it is not downloadable, is archive.org. It is a digital library, and it has a lot of material, especially before 1920. And you can look at Amazon Books or abbooks.com or Google Books, whether or not there is somebody in the world that sells it. And at the moment, that is a pain in the ass because the postage costs have gone up dramatically in the last year. I will now go to the second example. That's cite and write. I will show it how it works in Word, as I've installed it and it is most familiar to me. Let's assume, can you see me? Can you see this document?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Let's say I want to write a publication on the development of Venezuelan philatelic literature from 1880 to 1980 or 2000, something like that. There are several serials in literature that have been published, and Stanley Gibbons has forgotten that it has created a Spanish version for a Latin American catalog in 1912. It starts numbering its South America and Central American catalog in 1980 as edition 1, but this is earlier. Now, if I want to have an edition, on top of it, you see a lot of bars. But if you install Zotero and you install the add-in for Word, in add, you will see Zotero mentioned in the ribbon on top of your screen. If I click on it, it opens up and you can see at the left side that you can add citations or add a bibliography or insert notes. I will insert a citation And I want to have a citation for Stanley Gibbons. But first, it will ask you, if you start a document, the type and kind of style you want to include. Now, let's say I want to include Chicago. It will always be Chicago what it will use. And now in this case, I know what I want. And I press enter and it will add the citation. I will add another one, but now I want to have multiple, and I say I want to have a classical view, because as you can see where I'm standing now, I want to have multiple resources, not just one. I just type in the names of the people that I want to have included. And I select the items that I want. This is a very long list. So, and then I say, okay, and it will add the references. If I now say, okay, I'm done with the references, I want to have a bibliography at the end, or a reference list, I said, edit bibliography. And here you have it. You have added all the references I have asked for in the format that I've chosen. So this is in Chicago style. And this would be if you have everything added. I'm going to continue in my presentation. And here you can see it fully with all the references and the publications added as well. So you see the Blanco 1988, that is the last reference mentioned, and all the items by Hall and Fulcher. It is a little bit longer than this. It really is this, where you can see all the publications. If I scroll down, you see the Wickersham publications, and you see that they were in the Collectors Club Philatelist. It started in 1949. It ran to 1957, and then it was turned into a book in 1958. So you can also see the history of this publication. Now, if you want to have access to all what I've shown you, you have to have your own Zotero. You have to download Zotero and install it. You also have to connect to Zotero online. You have to have a password and a user. It will ask you to install a browser connector. And I didn't show it, but if you have a browser connection and you have a book that you have found on WorldCat or Amazon, you can, and it will show up in your browser, and you can download it from WorldCat or Amazon directly into your browser. It will ask you whether or not you will you want to incorporate it in where you are, or that you want to have it incorporated into a new library. I usually take a new library and then look at it whether or not it is correct. And if it is not correct, I will change it, because sometimes the information is not as it should be. For instance, if there is a 2-volume book and then it gives the number of pages, suddenly it will say that the number of pages is 1. It takes the first volume. You have to download either a Word or a LibreOffice or a Google Docs add-in, so that you can cite and write. And if you want to have access to the database and do all the things that I can, you have to ask me if you can join the group. Just send me an email, ask me if you want, tell me that you want to join the group, and I will allow you. Besides having the groups, you can have your own library, personal libraries. For instance, if you have your own library already, or if you want to create a personal one, for instance, because you have a lot of history books that are not primarily on philately, but that you would need to write your article, you can store them in your own personal library. And you can work together with group libraries. Then you have to have all the publications in one group library and not spread over several ones. That will be problematic because you will be a member of one specific group library, although I have two. Now, I have already done quite a lot, but these journals are on my to-do list. The main sheet, the Central American newsletter, the rest of Copa Carta, the rest of El Quetzal, and the others I still have to add. For Peru, I already added Transito and Transito 2, and some of the older magazines that had only a few volumes or a few years. I also want to try to add the last one. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce this, Cuadernos Philatélicos Uruguayanos. That's what I'm going to do. But if I'm getting more and other journals to add or books, then I will also add them. And I'm still searching for items. I don't have the national journals for Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Paraguay, and Venezuela. So I'm looking for those, but I need them in digital form or have them sent to me because I need to see the article in order to be able to add keywords and to correctly incorporate all the information I might need otherwise. A few months ago, I came across an auction catalog, and it gave a run of very old classic Latin America publications, most of which I have never seen before. And as you see, it was sold for £3,500, so it was quite a lot. I don't know whether or not any of these have been digitized, but one of the things that I really would like to have is the Revista La Sociedad Filatélica Argentina, because I know that there are a lot of good articles inside. I have the Revista de Correos y Telegrafos, but as a printed version, not as a digital version. And I also want digital versions for any journal that you could have. And one of the things that I'm really wanting to have is the Philatelic Gazette. It is available in America, but only for people working at universities in America. It has articles on the plating of the first emission of Haiti, and it's the first series on the plating. And it has a nice set of articles on plating of the state of Bolivar, which I've never seen anywhere else. Now, if you have a book, if you wrote a book, then please share the bibliographic information and provide me with tags so that I can include it in Zotero, so that other people might want to know and understand. And at the moment, at my list are the newest versions of the specialized catalog for Peru, the Bustamante. I know they are there, but I don't have the bibliographic information, and I do find them too expensive to buy, because $50 for volume 1 for a digital copy is a little bit expensive. Now the future. I am building this, but as I already said, only for Latin America and for the Middle East, but it could be done for all philatelic references, for all books, articles, and for all collecting areas, so that philatelists anywhere in the world could see what's out there, and hopefully, if it is open access, then you could add a URL or a DOI, that is a digital object identifier, usually used for scientific articles. And I want to share the library with one functional account somewhere in the world for some organization. For instance, the librarian at NPM philatelic.org or at a national library. I also would like to transfer the database to one location in the world. But that could also be done by sharing the functional account. That could also be with VIF. But that also depends on what people think about the future. To tell you something about the future, I try to become a member of the Brazilian Philatelic Association. But since half a year, you cannot get a membership anymore. I tried to become a member of Haiti Philately. I don't get a response. And I'm afraid that all the publications might get lost. That's why I also created this library, so that people can store their informations and hopefully at one location. And that brings me to pressing questions. One of the things I really want is to have a central depository for philatelic literature. As some of you might know, there are a lot of depositories. The Peru Society has one, the Chile Society has one, but I dread the day that I will read 404, that the site will no longer be maintained. And then you cannot download directly from my database. And I want to have a central location where I could store the information. And I also would like to have a file identification that is fast and logical. So the abbreviation of a journal plus a year plus a volume or an issue, or a journal and year and whole number. The Peru Society has done a good job in it because they have used one of these two formats. But I can also download all of the journals for the American Philatelist, and it gives me a number that I cannot trace or retrace from the information that I have. You can also download everything from the Collectors Club Philatelist. It is free to download, but I'm in discussion with them, or if I may access their information on the site as well. It is free, but they didn't give me permission yet. And I have permission to store the Central American newsletter somewhere. Now, last two sheets. One is contact. As there will be a PDF to download, you don't have to write it down. You can contact me on my email address. So if you want to become a member, just send an email to this address, and I will send an email from the database. You can connect on LinkedIn and Facebook. And I have some links that you might go. The links to my open access reference libraries. The first one is the one that I've showed you, and the second one is for my local society, the Philatelistenvereniging Groningen. We have a library on our own. We also have an own building as one of the few societies in the Netherlands, and we are giving people access from the outside so that you might know what we have. And we have about 3,000 to 4,000 books. And we got a donation from a famous Dutch collector. He left us about 1,000 books. He donated, he's still alive. Then you have some instruction videos on YouTube, how to use Zotero. One is a general introduction, and the other one is how to do citation management. And an archive, links to the archive.org, where you can find books. It is not always easy. You have to try something and it gives you a long list, but you might go down and scroll, and then at the 50th position, you might find what you're looking for. It is not as easy as it looks. And the Global Philatelic Library can give you access to the others. And I have given you a direct access to the Crawford Library. A lot of books on Central and South America and the Middle East, and some general books already have been incorporated and can be downloaded directly, but there might be something else for you if you collect something that doesn't belong to either of those two. So that was my presentation.
Thank you, Peter. A fantastic project. Actually, it's a really good initiative of yours just to get this going.
Excellent. Very, very interesting. Thanks for sharing.
I hope you will use it. Hey.
Yeah, that's the important part. I don't know if there are any questions out there for
I
Peter.
do have actually.
Go ahead,
Really,
Rafael.
really good presentation, Peter. Liked it very much. So in theory, if I already have a database, I use Access, right? But for books, I may be really inclined to use Zotero now. So I can export everything as a CVS file, right?
No, unfortunately, no. That's the only downside for Zotero. I tried to import a CSV, but it can't be done. There is, however, if you have a CSV, yeah, then when I create a list, I create a list in Excel.
Yep.
And then when I have it in Excel, that would be downloading it to a CSV, I make a specialized new column that combines the information from different fields and creates one single string. That one single string I import into Word, and I have a small script in Word that will break it down and make it into a RIS file so that I can create a RIS file and import it.
Okay.
That's the easiest way to do it. But sometimes if you have access, one of the things that is very hard to do, and for me, the other way is also very difficult. If you have multiple authors, then in Access, you will have multiple lines. It will have a connection one to multiple. But
Yep,
if you
many. Yep.
one too many, and usually that is how you store the database. That is also something that is done in Zotero in the background, but I cannot access the background, and that's one of the problems why I have to think ahead, and that's why I want to have a central storage facility, and because. For instance, I heard from Henry that they have a little bit of an issue with their site for Peru. And I don't know how long it will be accessible. And if I use the links to that site, then in a few years' time, I may lose that access.
Mm-hmm.
And what I can't do, what I do whenever I make a database myself, I also use Access for a lot of things. I have made Access for 2,500 teachers, 6 different questionnaires, and a lot of data to keep everything together. And then I can do the updates myself. If I think, okay, I need something to change, then I can do it myself. That's not possible in Zotero. So you have to do it one by one, or you have to export all the things you want in an Excel file or a comma separated file, recreate everything, and then add it back. But Zotero has a unique number that it stores for its publications. And you cannot update on the basis of that single number. So you have either delete everything. So if I, for instance, added all the publications for the American Philatelist, and they say you are not allowed to, then I have to delete everything or have to go another way around. And that's why I am hesitant to include the rest of the journals for Peru, because I don't know whether or not the journal will stay at that location. And then you would get cannot download, site doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And in order to avoid that, I am looking for a central location. Now, I have contacted the libraries, the philatelic libraries and societies in America and in London, and they are reluctant to help me. I don't know. They don't even reply, which I find quite weird, because
they just probably see that as an issue owning the IP, and they don't really want to relinquish it. So that's
probably. But a lot of, I only add things that are open access. If there is a paywall between me or like for instance, the Peru site, you have to have a password and a username. Otherwise, you cannot access the membership area where the publications are. But that doesn't hold for Chile and Ecuador. Ecuador are completely free. And everything you find on archive.org is also completely free. That's why Random Notes for Saudi Arabia is free. The Middle Eastern Philatelic Bulletin is free. And I can download it. But I'm thinking about doing things differently, that I have an Excel sheet where I split the first part of the link and the file name. So that if the link has to be changed, I can do it in one go and then update, well, exchange everything. That will be a problem, however, if people are starting to use my site for cite and write. Because if I would delete something, they would lose the link in their article.
Right.
So I don't know how many people at the moment are using my what I'm doing. I know a few do, but in general, there are only 5 members, which is not much. If you know how many people are out there that are collecting South America and the Middle East. Because I didn't show you the numbers for the Middle East. It's about half the size of Latin America, but 70% has to do with the Ottoman Empire. Because for most of the countries in the Middle East, that is all the issues and all the cancellations before independence. Until 1919, everything is Ottoman Empire. Or you have cancellation for France or Great Britain, or they all had their foreign agents there.
So one more question. I'm sorry, I don't want to take over in case somebody else has more questions, but is it SQL based and you're trying to write code for it, or is it just pretty much is a closed architecture that you use whatever they let you use and do the search?
No. I import information using RIS. RIS. So it tells you it's a special kind of format to import. It starts with type of publication and it ends with a command ER dash, and everything else you have to do in between. For instance, if you want to have an author, you have AU dash. If you want to have the title of a publication, it is TI dash. Or space dash space. So I have to recreate everything in that format. It is a long format. And
so it's possible then that I can, for example, from a query that I can just create, I have a table, let's say, and that table I can export it any way I want. I can export it, like I keep the membership, for example, the Puerto Rican Philatelic Society, and I make it conform to the Google basically contact list, so I can create that as well, so I can change it any way I want it as well.
As long as you have one of the formats that Zotero can import. And usually one of the easiest one is RIS, because it is let's say I use UTF-8 configuration, but you can also use ASCII if you want to, but ASCII and Spanish do not really mix.
Yeah, in database I had to convert when I'm looking because of the accent of French.
Yeah,
you really have to really already have a pre-map every time I do searches, so otherwise it's just a problem.
One of the things that I'm always there are some names that I get confused by names because most of the times I don't know whether something is part of the first names or the last name, especially in Spanish. Some names I can recognize, but most people from Latin America have 2 surnames.
Yep.
Father and mother.
Father and mother. Since January this year, that's also allowable in the Netherlands. They changed it. I'm not sure that it is making things a lot easier, but I try to be as complete as possible. So sometimes, for instance, I showed you Yuri. Jamil. It is YH as an initial. I use initials only. I don't name first names, because the first time I may encounter a name, it may be that I have only initials. And as I told you, I have studied scientometrics, and I want to do a similar kind of analysis on philatelic publications that I don't know whether the name or the term Web of Science means anything. It shows you the relationships between publications, authors, and sometimes their background. And that's something I wanted to create. I'm not yet there. It's not as easy as it seems, because, well, if you work on a database, you can normalize the database, but that is hard to do for a comma-separated file. When you download a comma-separated file, all the names of the authors are in one field, and all the keywords are in one field. And for publications like a catalog, and I also store, for instance, the information for Hiver and Scott Classic, there are a lot of countries. So I store all the countries that are in the index of the catalog as well, so that you know where to find something. And I also do that for older publications. One of the things I didn't talk about is a publication of 1901. It's by Kalman, and it's called the Advanced Catalog something something. It is very advanced. And for instance, for Columba, you have the cubiertas, the insured letter stamps, the very big ones. And it has 40 pages on it. In 1901, I only thought that they were really in the view of collectors after 1950 or so. But I must admit, those classic collectors knew a lot more than I imagined. A lot more, and especially from plating. They started plating between 1900 and 1920, and there are a lot of publications in the older magazines that contain that information we don't have. Where do you find information on plating all the stamps from Bolivar, the state Bolivar? Try to find it. It is harder than you think. And well, my admiration for those older collectors has gone up consistently in the last few years. My God, what did they know? I underestimated them. Really, I really did.
Yeah, that's true. And one more question, last question, actually, I promise. In terms of, so does Zotero will really search, for example, if you have PDF and some of the PDF now are searchable, you can make it, so
yes.
It will recognize the text inside. So if I'm doing a search, it will go and point me to those publications.
Possibly, but I do not add publications, and there is a reason for it. Up to 300 megabyte, Zotero is free. And if you don't have, for instance, I do not add the Google links and the Amazon links that you get when you download directly from Amazon or Google. Because those links will cost you 1 MB. In the first week that I worked with Zotero, at the end of the week, I had 300 MB, 300 megabyte. But when you go beyond that, you have to pay. And if you go beyond, I think, if you want to have a limitless account, you have to pay $120 a year. That's a little bit much for me.
It doesn't give you the opportunity to use your own cloud system or
no.
Zotero. It doesn't really like.
No.
It's not open to that. It just want you to buy their own cloud service.
Yeah.
But if I keep it locally, then it doesn't matter. For example, I'm only interested for stuff for Puerto Rico, Cuba. I can keep it local in my computer, and then it will do that.
Yeah, possibly. But what you also might be able to do is, if you have instead of a URL, that you have the location on your computer. I haven't tried that, but it might work.
But usually in the database, I don't save even images. I only put a link to an image or a link to a book.
Yeah,
because otherwise if the database gets corrupted, it's a problem. So I only do links to them.
That's why I do a link to something that is downloadable and not insert the PDF as well.
Oh yeah, that'd be a problem. Oh gosh.
And for instance, yeah, on the site for Peru, you have the Bustamante for 1981 in parts. And I have a program that combines the parts again so that I have 2 volumes. But if you would store that volume at 800 megabytes, then it would go fast. And to give you an idea, I have more than 200 gigabytes of philatelic information on my computer, and 80% is PDFs.
Yeah, I believe it. I'm kind of likewise. Yeah, yeah.
So the database that I create now with links and the search options is less than 1 megabyte on their own file. And if I download it, then I think it is 9 megabyte. So it isn't big.
Yeah, no, I understand. Thank you, Peter. Don't want to monopolize conversation. Thank you.
I hope that you will use it.
Yes,
if you,
I already downloaded it, so I'm gonna.
If you use it, let me know.
Yeah,
and give me suggestions and ideas. And as I told you, if you have information that I might not have, or publications that you may share with me,
sure.
Please do.
Okay, thank you.
And if you want to have, I have a few months ago, I published a newsletter with some information. I will publish another one, possibly this week or the week after that, to announce that this video exists, so that people can view it. But also, I will give more information on the decisions I've made. For instance, on the use of tag words. For instance, I use cancels and not all the other things. Does not postmark cancellations. I try to keep it as short as possible. And sometimes that means that I use words not in the way that they are intended to be, but because of the classical use you might have to. For instance, proof. You wouldn't really use that for essays, but in the old days they did. Forgery is the primary one that I use, because that's the one they used earlier. And then you have falsification and reprint and all that. And I try to have you just remember one word, and then you can find the rest, and then there will be some differentiation and use of the other links. But if I don't find it in the article at first, I do not try to get involved mentally in every detail of the article, because it will take too long. Maybe it doesn't show, but I have seen over 100,000 pages in 2 years.
Wow.
And there will be another 100,000 in the coming year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mauricio, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Peter, for this very interesting presentation. I believe you partially answered the question that I was going to make. For example, here we have our Philatelic publication, which is still in print. There's also the original is in the computer.
Yeah.
And we make it in Word, and then we print it. But if we want to send you the file of this magazine, what format do you want it, so that you can add the links or the reference of the articles that are in here, which, by the way, are really interesting. What should we do to get everyone else to get to know the publication?
I will give you a double answer. One, if you send a digital version to me, it doesn't really matter. My son works in ICT, and in the room where I'm sitting, there is our backup system. He has servers working on site. He has built my computer. And if I don't know how to get it, he knows. But most of the time, I do know how to, if it is a PDF or Word or LibreOffice or anything like that, I can read it. I would prefer something that is OCR. Then I can copy paste the title. And if you have an index, then that would be great.
Yeah.
Because then a lot of work is already done for me. There are some very good indexes, but usually they have what I prefer is names of the authors, and then the name of the publication of the article, and then the volume, issue, and pages, and then I can go ahead. Most of the other things, sometimes if I know something is a little bit more complex, I split the information and I use a quick and dirty method in using Access to create a new query that combines information if the information itself is not complete. For instance, sometimes they have not the volume and the issue, but the whole number. And I would prefer that all journals, just like Jim Negus, that you have year, volume, issue.
I see.
It's the most logical format of indexing information. But if it is differently, if you have a whole number, then I will use whole numbers. If there is nothing else, but otherwise I have to make a choice, because there are a few drawbacks from Zotero. You either have issue or whole number. You can't have both. One of the things that really annoys me is that I don't have a specific field for translated title. So normally I have a title, and behind brackets, I have a translated title in English. So for instance, I am translating all the titles for Mi Oficina from Spanish to English, and then correct it, because one of the things that is always translated incorrectly is celos. Yep. It is translated as seals and not as stamps. Thank you very much, Google. You don't understand. AI is still not perfect. Otherwise it would know. It would do correctly.
That's the Google.
Huh? Yeah. When they correctly translate celos into stamps when it is required, and when they keep celos when it is really seals, then I'm convinced. But before that time, they still have to convince me. But if I would get access to the Puerto Rico journal or Honduras journal, it's fine with me. The problem is I can't spend too many money on philately. My budget is limited. That's one of the reasons why I cannot be a member of the Royal Society. It's insanely expensive at £140 a year. All of the other societies where I'm a member from together are not even that expensive. Any other questions?
Yeah, Peter, I do have a few, and thank you for sharing this project, because it's pretty close to the fundamentals of what we started with Mi Oficina. And one of the principles was, a lot of us don't write articles or books, but we all talk, right? So talking and putting videos together and presentation in a way is a form of philatelic literature, if you will, and there are 500 videos plus already that have that content. So that's
why I include them in the library.
And we appreciate that very much, because that ties up pretty closely with something we want to do. Today we are giving all these presentations. We are making it available in YouTube, that for what we foresee and the industry foresees a very long-lasting platform that is probably going to surpass all of us, which is a great thing. So we don't have to worry about the central repository, which is probably the main problem that a project like this will face. You're absolutely right. Those URLs may be dropped at some point when no one is no longer supporting that side. So with that, on the Peru specific, you may, as we discussed before, the website that is there is 20 plus years old, and it was never updated for many different reasons. But now we are at that juncture that is going to be migrated. So as looking into what the next repository would be, an ideal repository is one that lasts at least 20 or plus years. There are many possibilities we see with Zotero, at least that I can take a look at right now. And if one of those is to create searchable indexes inside Zotero from the already OCR PDF that we have, it's going to facilitate the search not only for the initial creation of the indexes by the user, because the user experience is going to be important. I can imagine that a project like this, nothing could be more frustrating than picking on your example, right? The Bolivar plating. Okay, I know there was a publication in 1908, and I know there is the index card that tells me what the name of that publication is, but it's nowhere in this planet that I can find it because it's gone. Using that example, right? So trying to create that linkage between exists and where I find it, I guess is critical. So the first question for you is related to Zotero. I was trying to find where are they based, but is this a European project? Because it looks like an open source with hosted somewhere, but I cannot tell where the majority of the promoters are.
No, I didn't look into it. And the reason is there aren't many free products that can do what Zotero does, and most of them will not allow an integration with Word that you can cite and write. Right. And I did find that very important. Also, a few of the other options that Zotero has, the other ones don't have. Zotero is the most complex of all the programs that are freely available. And I tried to have, I wanted to use RefWorks because I used that at university, but there is no way that you as a private person can get RefWorks. And it also is the same for EndNote. That are the two main competitors. Yeah. Does it stay on forever? That's another issue. But that's why I also wanted to have the ability to have an export that it is an export in RIS or RefTect of EndNote. Probably those will exist in the future. Like most programs still can read DBase files. DBase itself no longer exists. Or maybe it still does, I don't know. 10, 15 years ago it did. It had a new one. But you can still access DBase files. Most programs still don't have any problem at all. But it is a really old format. And RIS is also a really old format, but it is still used by many programs.
Yeah, and to that point, and that goes close to my heart because I learned these things with DBase 2 and DBase 3, so I'm familiar with Ashton Tate, that dates myself already. But the point there is similar to FTP, right? They are so old that everything else probably is based on it. So they have to go to the common point to move forward. And that's exactly what I was trying to look in this. In looking at the Zotero website, I noticed, as you mentioned, the upgrade storage, and there is the unlimited for 120 a year. But if I were to take this as an example, just for the website of Peru, we spend more money a year maintaining the hosting of the old location. So if Zotero is the long-lasting right format or right repository that we want to get, and we will need to get two features. One, if the storage space is going to be accessible from outside, similar to any other, like Google Drive or OneDrive, that I can get the URL and connect it in one place, it sounds like a no-brainer to me to keep it as a repository, because it can be used not only for everything that is going to be within Zotero, but I can always make the external reference for the websites that are going to have that. So can the Zotero repository be externally accessible outside of Zotero UI? And I'm referring specifically to the PDF, if we were to store the PDFs there.
I'm not sure if that would be possible, but there are a lot of things I still don't know, because most of the time I spend at adding information to the database itself. But as Zotero is accessible by R and Python, then it might be possible to combine the information and create something else. For instance, you could create how do you call it? A kind of a dashboard with R, and that accesses the data Zotero at the back end. But how that would work, I don't know. And it is beyond my capabilities and beyond my knowledge at the moment, whether or not that would be possible. But I think it would be. And there are so many things that are going quite quickly at the moment in the area of AI. That I've seen a few days ago. You had a program for R that could do OCR scanning. So if you have a PDF and an OCR scanning and you combine everything, I don't know where it would end. I really don't. And I also don't know about the impossibilities or the boundaries that exist between the programs. Now, well, I showed you that if you have a free access, but not a membership access to my Zotero, then you can search, but there are a lot of things you can't do. And I'm still struggling with a few things. For instance, if I want to have something like a Web of Science, then I have to normalize the database again. Then I have the title and the number and another table for the authors and another table for the keywords. And then I could start building Web of Science using open source software. And I do not know whether I would use a traditional database like DBase or Access, or that I would have to go to a new database called Neo4j. They are created differently, but it seems they are faster. But maybe the complexity and the rethinking of all the issues you are confronted with do not outweigh the knowledge you have. Because even with, I think that I have 27,000 authors linked to publications. So you have a table with 27,000 records and maybe 40,000 records for the tags, and then the 6,000 or 7,000 for the basic information for the resource itself. For Access, that's a small database. For DBase, it was a small database. So you might not need the newer, faster versions. But if you access the PDFs on the background by the link, then you might need to have, then it will be big again. And there is somebody at the University of Zurich that I follow. He does look into publications, but with OCR PDFs and not just a combination of pictures, but real OCR. And he reads scientific articles and creates new information based on the PDFs and the information and the databases and the literary information, bibliographic information to find new answers. One of the things that I find, what I learned in the last year, that 90% of all publications in Philately only have one author. And then you have a few with two and a handful with more. And that's different from science. There you can have 10 or 20 or 100 authors.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes different.
Yeah.
And there is also another difference that I found. In science, you don't have one publication with the same name, the same content in two journals.
Oh, if you have that all the time.
You have that all the time. Then the American Philatelist publishes something, and then the London Philatelist publish the same article.
Yeah. So thank you for that, and I can appreciate that challenge, because from an index perspective, it's going to be a problem. Getting back into the Peru side that I'm a little bit more familiar with. So the central repository definitely is going to be something to be resolved pretty soon. Maybe when we meet at IBRA, I will be sharing with you some of that information.
You know, I tried to get the Global Philatelic library interested, because they have the Crawford library already.
Right.
But they don't even respond, which I do find a little bit strange.
And that goes to my other point, and I don't know if this could be a little controversial or not, and that's why I asked where the hosting of Zotero is. Now, obviously, copyright infringement is going to be a big deal with online publications. All the stuff that we have on the Peru side, it is either public domain, it has a special permission, or has all those things. So experimenting with the content in the Peru Philatelic site, it will not be a problem from that perspective. But I'm wondering if all these other organizations, when they see this project, because one of the key benefits is to have a central repository, because you can do tons of things, but the most important one is you are going to perpetuate that knowledge over time and over the longevity of the individual groups.
Yeah, that's why
that a liability at the same time, because some of that publication may not be copyright free, and that's maybe where the love comes. Yeah.
That's when well, there are a few societies I am a member of, and for quite a lot of those, there is a problem in how long do we last? Do we survive? Some only have 10 or 12 members. And even if you have a very large society, in the Netherlands last year, the Society of Utrecht, and who has been in the Netherlands knows that Utrecht is one of the biggest cities in the Netherlands. There was a society with 300 members, but they couldn't find a board, and they have vanished. 300 members, and the society has gone. It dissolved itself last year. Rotterdam Society, Rotterdam is also one of the biggest cities, almost went out of existence. And I'm a member of 2 Dutch specialist societies. And every time I say it to any specialist society, think about what's the next step. If you are close to extinction, make sure that everything is donated to a central depository, or maybe to your national library, because a national library might also be able to place everything online. And if there are multiple depositories, it is not a problem if you take my repository or my Zotero as an entry point.
Yeah, that's a good exit strategy, definitely, going out of this market.
I would prefer to have everything. Let's say if all the societies would give free access to everything that has been published before 2010 and has been digitized, then a lot of information would already be saved.
Yeah.
But the problem is, where will the central depository be? Who is going to create it? And where will it be? That's why I tried to contact the American Philatelist Library, the Royal Library, the Smithsonian, and I've contacted the librarians there. they don't react. It is different from what they are used to, but it is something that they might owe to collectors in general, that we keep all the information for the next generation.
Yep. We'll chat more in person. There are a few ideas that maybe we can discuss offline for that.
Yeah.
But,
I don't know how many will come to Ibra from the ones here.
there are a few. Luis Fernando is actually in the jury, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I'll be there a couple of days, and very many who are not here.
Yeah.
Alfonso
Yeah,
was
I will be there
driving.
too.
Yeah. Oh, Fernando is also there. So we'll gather over there and have an offline
Undecided,
conversation with
so.
some ideas.
No, there are. I have seen that also the specialist German societies for South America will also be there.
Yeah, it's going to be a big show. So looking forward to it.
I already
hope the weather
contacted.
cooperates.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
We'll see. That was great. Any other question before we close for today?
And if you have any other question, just send me an email.
Sure. I will send you one for sure. I'm going to be part of your group there.
Okay.
And I've been experimenting with a couple of things. And I at this point, I have more questions than anything else, but that's good. At least, you know, that can take part of the items. And thank you also for including the YouTube videos put together by my Oficina, because on the web page that we created, we put a very rudimentary index, which is nothing like a Google Sheets, but eventually we need to replace that with something. And if that something is Zotero that can be used not only for that, but for a lot more, that's going to be a win for everyone. So
yeah,
that's really good. So with that, Peter, thank you. We appreciate your project. I'm very excited about the possibilities of it in the future. That's great.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thank you for having me.